Hello again everyone, it's me Matt, thank you for joining me on today's video. We're discussing naval defensive capabilities, a specific weapon system, but let's talk a little bit about the Navy in general. You know, I don't know much about the Navy, I don't focus much on it on my channel, but I really feel like I need to do more on it. I've had a lot of requests from you guys talking about all the different naval capabilities and weapons that are out there, and you really want me to discuss them, so I'm going to try and touch on them as much as I can. It's really hard for me to relate to naval, you know, I guess weapon systems or ships and combat systems because I just don't know enough about them, and it's something I think I need to research more and showcase the channel more because clearly you guys want me to do more footage on it. So, ships, they're quite inherently risky pieces of equipment because, of course, the inherent risk of being at sea is constant. You are literally floating on water that could sink the ship at any time, but of course in the Navy or any kind of combat role you have the risk of other capabilities engaging you and sinking you to the bottom of the ocean. One of those things is ribs, or small attack craft that can cause a lot of damage from short or long distance, depending whether it be, you know, a missile being launched from that ship or a small crew getting on board. And as you can see with these troops right now, they're using the smaller weapon systems to try and hold off potential engagements, and the small arms only do so much, and that's where I'm about to talk about something a little bit more capable than this beautiful machine gun we're looking at right now. The Mark 38. This is an incredible piece of firepower used on most ships of the United States Navy, but also a couple of other ships around the world. It is quite a capable, I would say, defensive firepower piece to have for any naval ship that is going to provide you with a little bit of close-in engagement, but also give you a little bit of medium-length firepower depending on the kind of engagements that you're taking on. As I said before, though, really, this weapon system is primarily designed for small craft, or junk boats as they're called, that are coming towards the ship that are a lot more difficult to engage with, you know, launched missiles from the ship that can engage surface vessels, or Seaweeds, which is just too expensive to be launching a bazillion rounds a second at a ship that really is not needing that many rounds to engage. It only takes a few rounds to sink a ship. Seaweeds is really primarily designed to engage you know, inbound missiles instead of inbound ships. Although Seaweeds can still do it, it doesn't make much sense to do so, and they were looking upon defending ships with a more accurate, stable platform that can range into targets, whether it be via electronic system or handheld, which basically means you can get behind this thing and punch rounds downrange. Now, if you have served on this weapon system and have used it on ships, I would love to hear your experiences on it. I find a lot of footage, a lot of good pictures of people using these things. Clearly it's got some punch to it. It's basically a Bushmaster gun that is placed behind the armored fighting vehicles of today of the United States military, which is pretty cool. Bushmaster makes some fantastic weapon systems. Of course, the chain gun that they produced along with Hughes for the US Army has been used extensively, and they know how to make weapon systems of this kind. It's definitely one of their sort of specialities. So the Mark 38 then, what exactly is it? Well, its application as a 25mm Bushmaster is effective for close-in surface-to-surface and surface-to-air engagements against small watercraft and aircraft at distances up to 2,700 yards or about 2.5 kilometers. It is also suited for other short-distance self-protection such as mine detonation and even potential swimmers who are trying to get on board of the ship. And we're kind of looking at sort of the special forces kind of things going on there. There is about 500 of this type of gun that have been supplied to the US Navy and US Coast Guard, and a number have been exported as well. The weapons are surprisingly maintained in a rotating pool, which means that the guns never stay on board the ship constantly. They're actually sent back for rotation and repair on each specific ship. However, some are variously deployed upon some permanent ships, such as auxiliary ships or patrol craft, or even Coast Guard cutters. The price range for the Bushmaster 25mm L87 Mark 38 chain gun was actually quoted round about today's price of $53,232 US, which, considering of the kind of technology you're getting on board of this weapon system, it's pretty substantially cheap, I would say. The weapon weight is around 110 kilograms, and with the mount on top of there, it's about 459 kilograms. So this thing is not lightweight, but does it really matter when you're mounting it to a ship? It can fire single shots at up to 200 rounds per minute, and the effective range can be increased a little bit with different projectiles that are being developed even to this day. The muzzle velocity of the HIET is 1,100 meters a second. The muzzle velocity for armored piercing discarding sabot is around 1,360 meters a second. Its peak recoil is 4,540 kilograms, which, considering the amount of force you're putting down on a 25mm projectile at fully automatic, you're gonna need that. The Mark 38 Bushmaster is the naval version of the chain gun copyright from Bushmaster, an externally powered weapon system developed by Hughes for the US Army. The Mark 38 fires the 25 by 137mm pattern cartridge, which is the standard NATO 25mm ammunition. Procured by the Army as the M242, the gun is designed as the Mark 38 in naval service, with the pedestal mount the Mark 88 Mod 0. The weapon is a single-barrel, air-cooled, semi-fully automatic machine gun system that is in standard configuration, manually trained and elevated. The guidance system is unstabilized in its base form, although an automatic guidance system has been developed and is offered by the US company Cole Morgan for retrofit and new build installations. The name chain gun, which is copyrighted from them, comes from the use of a loop of a standard industrial double-row roller chain carried horizontally to drive the bolt back and forth. The length and width of the chain are determined by the length of the round and the desired rate of fire. The chain actually runs at a constant speed, carrying a shoe that drives the bolt. When in line with the bolt, the shoe pulls back and forth, locking and opening the bolt. Now, I can tell you this first and foremost, using chain guns in my British Army career with the Warriors, they are not the most reliable weapon systems when the rounds are being pulled from below the mechanism instead of above the mechanism. And in fact, the machine gun we used on the Warriors actually pulled the rounds up and was quite prone to getting jammed in the way in which it was configured, because it was designed actually for helicopters. And of course, as you know, helicopters are actually feeding the projectiles from above and into the mechanism from there, so they weren't the greatest. But in this configuration, it really doesn't matter. It's purely designed for the way it's supposed to work. The feed to the gun is powered by the same motor that drives the chain. During firing, the gun's barrel, bolt, and breech mechanism recoil together as one unit independent of the weapon's receiver, which bears no direct firing stresses and thus can be produced from lightweight aluminum or aluminium. Despite this construction, McDonnell Douglas Helicopter actually claimed in service the M242 receivers have withstood the firing of over 10,000 rounds without adverse effects, and that's a testament as to why you want this kind of weapon system on a naval platform, because if you are engaging, a ship or targets from long distance, they're not the most easiest thing to hit on a moving ship, if rough seas or whatever else is going on, so you want to be able to just keep putting rounds down range all day on this thing. And it's not like you need to really consider yourself worrying about ammunition, because ships have a lot of space to carry a ton of this ammunition. Unlike its land-based counterparts, which offer a dual feed capability that allows two different types of ammunition natures to be alternately fed at will from opposite sides of the weapon according to the target type, the Mark 38 systems are configured only for single direction feed at the time. Since there is no requirement for armor defeating ammunition, they basically select upon what ammunition they need prior to going into the engagement. Be also aware that the Mark 38 is also never on its own. It normally will have several other weapon systems accompanying it to provide it with different capabilities of engagement. So if you did need to use armored piercing, you would probably have one in armored piercing configuration and the other in a high explosive configuration of two different Mark 38s on the ship. Since the Mark 38 Bushmaster is crew-served, a safety interlock system is provided. If the barrel fails to recoil due to long duration of hang fire or other ammunition fault, the gun will stop with the breech still locked. After the defective round has been cleared, firing will resume and the gunner can release and press the trigger again, which really allows the weapon system to consistently be verified for if there is any jams inside of there, because the mechanism will always open into the open position. The fire can be launched in single shots or in automatic mode at a rate of 175 rounds per minute, which, considering you're putting 25mm of round down range, it's pretty consistent. The gun is credited with a barrel life of 25,000 rounds before interchanging. The dispersion is round about 0.5 mils, which is a fairly accurate grouping, I would say, for a weapon system of this kind. The system, which is crewed by a single gunner, typically assisted by a spotter, is manually controlled and self-contained. However, there are modifications to this platform now that allow it to be engaged from even the bridge of the ship. The Mark 88 mount gives 360 degrees worth of traverse, but does have safety stops to accidentally engage another crew member on board of the platform of the ship. And it also permits the elevation of plus 55 degrees and down to minus 20 degrees. The gun's chain gun mechanism is driven from the 24-volt DC battery charged from the ship's electrical power supply via a Mark 218 power unit. The Mark 88 mount is not stabilized and is hand-aimed, therefore it cannot make very many hits when mounted on a lively small ship combatant, which why they're more primarily used upon larger vessels. Though shields were seen on some early Mark 38 platforms, the current guns offer no crew protection, and really why would you need to when you're engaging up to 2,500 meters away? A pair of ballistic panels, one on either flank of the gun, have also been used, but this measure is now understood to have been completely dropped in the Navy. The Mark 38 uses standard linked ammunition. It also fires from an open bolt, which protects it against cook-off hazards, and empty cases are ejected forward of the weapon overboard. A lot of people ask me the question, Matt, why don't they save the brass? It makes no sense it pouring into the ocean. I would agree with you on that. It doesn't make much sense just wasting rounds like that can be recycled and processed, but that's not the primary focus of a weapon system like this. They don't care about recycling ammunition. They want a reliable weapon system that can put rounds downrange onto target without any misfeeds or jams, and if they have to try and, adapt to recycling of empty brass just to make it, more energy efficient or save money, that's not what they're looking for. But I would agree with you. I don't like seeing, empty brass going over the sides. I would love to collect it myself into a little bucket and make something out of it, because I'm weird like that. Reliability is assessed as a 23,700 mean rounds between stoppages, which is very reliable considering that you should never really be pushing down 23,700 rounds on this gun platform when going into an engagement. However, it does demonstrate that it has a lot of capability to perform very well if required. And as I mentioned, the claimed dispersion is 0.5 mils, and at 2,500 meters, you really can't complain with that. Interestingly, although electrochemical rifling, or ECR, is attracting a lot of interest elsewhere in the world, MDHC, then Hughes, developed its own ECR process for the Bushmaster barrels some time ago. Since these have been a progressive gain twist to minimize inboard drag, ECR removes metal by electrolysis to form the rifling grooves. It's an easier approach to the cutting rifling of standardized barrels and provides a little bit more tolerance and accuracy of the weapon system. In the naval configuration, the Mark 38 gun delivers a single shot plus automatic fire up to 200 rounds per minute. Operational ammunition of this weapon system is the 25mm M792 HEIT, and for training the M793 TPT. With the M792 round, the maximum effective range is 2,470 meters, and 150 linked rounds are carried on the gun at any one time. According to Kollmorgen, however, the effective range is extended beyond the specified 2,500 meters when using the stabilized weapon control system for the Mark 38 Mod 0. Now, as you can see by this footage, there are some variants and upgrades of this platform. In 1989, the chain gun manufacturer McDonnell Douglas Helicopters announced a new series of weapons using the same principle. Those relevant to the naval market include the following that I will discuss. The Bushmaster 2, which is a 30mm version already fired with 500 rounds of late 1989, was due for the Austrian Air Force and US Navy. It fires the standard GAU-8 ammunition or modified Radan KCB ammunition. There is the Bushmaster 3, the designation of a further enlarged version of the same basic gun that can fire 35mm or 50mm rounds. The Bushmaster 4 is a derivative of the Bushmaster 3 chambered for the Bofors 40mm L70. The Mark 38 Mod Star C25 is the stabilized and remote controlled system offered by Kollmorgen. This adds a 2-axis gyro stabilization for increased firepower, range, and hit probability by incorporating elevation motors and gyros, and a new pedestal mounting and rotating motor. There's also a TV camera for the basic gun system aiming. The upgrade does not require deck penetration. Remote control is available for improved operation and protection of the operator, as the interfacing and personal computer-based digital control is normally in the bridge. There's also the Mark 96, also a stabilized version of the pre-existing Mark 38 mount, intended for the deployment on the PC-1 Cyclone class of ship. It combines the Bushmaster cannon and the Mark 19 grenade launcher. Finally, there is the Valkyrie. A number of stabilized gun mountings for the Bushmaster gun have now been developed under the US Navy Stabilized Weapon Platform System, or SWPS program, as the main armament for the PCW-1 Cyclone. These include the Valkyrie, a modular stabilized mounting that couples the cannon with electro-optical fire control system, and a large on-mount ammunition container with a universal mounting for the guided anti-surface Hellfire or anti-air Stinger missiles. The history of this gun is quite complex and dates back to the time where, Bushmaster was looking for weapon systems to fit actually onto the Bradley fighting vehicle of the US Army. But at the end of 1982, the US Naval Sea Systems Command instructed Naval Warfare Center at Crane, Maryland, to design and manufacture a new deck mounting for the M242, which would be able to use in naval comparison. The first units to receive the Mark 38 in August 1983 were the US Navy Special Boat Units of 12 and 20. Trials for the Mark 38 in 3 Panama-based Mark IV patrol boats subsequently began in 1986, with one gun mounted fore and aft in each vessel. The weapon system was originally evaluated for wider naval use in mid-1987. Later that year, the Chief of Naval Operations approved procurement to replace the obsolete Mark 16 20mm guns. These guns were a lot more difficult to support and requiring overhaul every 6,500 rounds, and did not use the standard NATO ammunition, and many rounds were actually considered unsafe. The Mark 16 had many other undesirable features, including a breech mechanism reportedly notorious for removing the operator's fingers. As mid of 1988, many Mark 88s were in service in the Persian Gulf and equipped with the Mark IV patrol boats in the Panama Canal Zone. Plans laid down in August 1988 by Naval Sea Systems Command indicated target acquisition of 460 Mark 38s. Production of the Mark 38 25mm cannon was drastically accelerated in 1987 and 1988 to meet the needs of the ships in the Persian Gulf. Much of the work that was done to procure and design of this weapon system was done at the same time as the Sea Whiz program. The Mark 38 had been deployed in the Persian Gulf since 1988 and was used in mine countermeasures and defense against small craft in the theater. During 1992, partly as a result of the experiences in the Persian Gulf, the US Navy decided to replace all existing 20mm and 40mm mounts with the 25mm Mark 38 gun in the Mark 88 mount. In effect, this meant that nearly all US warships and Coast Guard cutters were given at least 2 of these guns. The weapon system has actually done very well in its service reliability, and the US Navy praised its reliability, effectiveness, and modest price tag. So they delivered roughly about 300 of these naval guns to the US Department of Defense as we speak of this day. 200 more of these systems were presumably ordered, but never really fell through, because I think the US Navy Coast Guard didn't see a huge amount of need for these guns, considering that the Navy was doing a lot of the actual designation of using these weapon systems. Another major setback for this program was the loss of the LPD-17 program that adopted the 30mm Mark 46 instead. Although production for the land-based application continues, there is no real new production contracts for the Navy variant. The US Navy states that the existing 450 weapons in service has been very well maintained in the rotating pool from which they are taken, with either temporary or permanent installations. This would appear to make sense in light of the small size of today's US Navy fleet, which is expected to eventually settle at around 300 units. The Coast Guard has a more settled policy, perhaps inevitable in view of the fact that their ships carry the Bushmaster as a primary weapon, not a last-ditch desperation defense that of which the main Navy vessels use. Existing systems continue to be modernized in the form of automatic stabilizers and or aiming devices on the Mark 38s that are being used and taken into use for outgoing platforms. Also, this weapon remains in service to this day. Ammunition procurement is understandably important because this weapon system is not going to be here for a long time, but works very well in its land-based configuration in the same instance, so ammunition is quite easy to get. In more violent confrontations, the Mark 38 has already won its spurs in the Persian Gulf. Naval sources in the area have suggested that it shredded all types of small craft and frequently used in those waters. Nevertheless, Bushmaster is now going to be replaced by the heavier, more capable 30mm Mark 46 weapon systems in the future. Consequently, if they do get replaced, it's safe to say that the 25mm may be a projectile at sea that will never be used again. But we'll see what happens once they bring in the 30mm, and maybe they'll get bored of that and bring an even bigger gun in. Let's just go 500mm. Screw it, let's just get big. Let's get big or go home. Get the 16-inch guns back out. Anyway, folks, I hope you really enjoyed today's video. I really enjoyed learning about the Mark 38. It's a fun little weapons platform. If you did enjoy it, please leave me a like. I'd love to hear from you guys if you have used this system or your input to this video. If you did also enjoy and want to be notified of any upcoming videos, please click the little bell by the subscribe button so you can be notified of any upcoming videos in the future. Also, for everyone who's been supporting my Patreon and PayPal, I cannot thank you enough. I'd also like to do a massive shout out to all of those who are members of my channel. I did a couple of shout outs on livestream the other day there, but thank you to everyone who are members and have, I guess, joined membership of my channel. If you want to become a member, you can follow the link in the description box below or click on the bell also to be notified of how to subscribe to the channel with membership. Thank you again everyone for joining me, and I hope to see you on the next video. All the best. Bye bye.